This is me, just a normal guy and graduate student at Oregon State University. There's something you should probably know about me though. I love beer. I should also mention that I love the outdoors. I mean, what goes better with an ice cold beer than being out on the river on a hot day, or enjoying the sunset at the top of a long hike? So you can imagine my concern when some of my colleagues informed me that beer might actually be having an impact on the environment. What? I had to learn more, so I invited them out to discuss over a beer. Alright, so thanks for meeting with me. I don't get this connection between what the big deal is with beer and water.
For every pint you drink, there's about 4 pints of water that's used in the brewery, which is a half a gallon. That's not counting any of the growing of the barley or the hops, which that's really where the majority of the water is used, is in the agricultural side of it too.
How much water do you think that is? I mean, if you had to guess.
I've heard it can be up to, when you count in the agricultural side, it could be up to 300 to 1. So it could be really
300 pints for
300.
1 pint of beer.
Right.
I'm going to take this further. We can think about the energy required to run the brewery and the machinery and how much water that actually takes. So anytime you're thinking about like an energy-intensive industry, you're thinking about water use.
Right. Yeah, and to heat all that water, it's a lot of energy, and there's not many things that take a lot more energy than to heat something as dense as water.
So essentially what you're both talking about is that energy, whenever you're producing energy, it always requires water for the most part. And whenever you're using water, a lot of the time it requires energy. So it requires energy to treat that water, it requires energy to pump that water. So there's always a connection between those two, and you're seeing it with beer, both in the beer making process, as well as just the power that you're using to actually make the beer.
Yeah, I agree that, yeah, you can't separate out the energy side and the water side. It's inseparable. For brewing is a really good example of that, actually. The water use and heat, water use and energy use are one and the same.
After talking to my colleagues, it was quite clear that making beer takes a lot of water and energy. One of the main drivers of that water use is agriculture. It never even occurred to me that it takes a lot of water to grow the ingredients that go into beer. As I looked into this more, I learned that agriculture actually accounts for 70% of the water use around the world. That's water use that most of us never see or realize, but it's something that we all are drivers of. I also learned that water and energy are directly linked. It takes a lot of energy to clean the water that we drink and to treat the water that we flush. And it also takes a lot of water to make that energy. It was all a lot to take in. So I decided to learn more, and I wanted to get a brewer's perspective. So I headed over to Oregon State University's own brewery to meet with an expert. Would you say it's fair to say that the brewing process is an energy and water intensive?
Very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, and the malting part, the malting phase that we don't see in the brew house is very, very energy intensive. And then the kilning cycle as well, plus moving air through the barley. So very energy intensive, very water intensive. Brew house the same. We have energy going into the mash tun as far as heating water up and then holding that temperature. But during the kettle, you have 60 minutes of boiling. So think about that on a large scale.
Sure.
We're dealing with thousands and thousands of gallons.
Right.
Typically, most craft brewers are probably running somewhere around 10 barrels of water per 1 barrel of beer produced.
Okay.
Yeah, that's everything, including cleaning water and the actual water that you've evaporated. Lots of breweries have been working on getting that down because water's money. You know, the industry's concerned it used to be the bottom line, it used to be money saving, but now it's more being acceptable to consumers as far as being green.
Sure.
And wanting to achieve that as well.
Yeah. Do you think there's a demand from the customer side for more green or sustainable beers?
Well, I think not only customer, but I think there's a lot of folks that are producing beer, especially in craft market, that are concerned about having a small footprint.
Sure.
Yeah, on the environment.
Oh man. After talking to Jeff, I was feeling a little bit guilty for all the beer I drink. I was even thinking of giving up beer and just sticking to water. But I thought I'd get one last perspective, so I headed back across campus to meet with a water expert. Have you ever thought about what goes into making a beer, as far as water or energy or anything like that?
No, that's a good question. I haven't really sat down and penciled out how many gallons of water are actually embedded in a glass of beer quite to the same degree that I have with bottled water, because it's something that I lecture about.
What do you mean bottled? I mean, wouldn't bottled water just be a one-to-one? You just take the water from the tap and put it in a bottle and it doesn't take any more resources than that?
No, most of the bottled water companies do some sort of a filtration. There's also water that's associated with rinsing out the bottles. I think it's on the order of 2 to 3 liters of water are actually embedded in each bottle, or 1 liter of bottled water. So, and then the other thing that's kind of embedded in that very few people think about is how much water is embedded actually in the plastic. It takes about 1,850 gallons of water to refine a standard barrel of crude, and then to make it into that PETE plastic, it takes about another 24 gallons of water for each pound of that plastic. And so when you start to add it all up, there's quite the way I try to describe it to people is that it takes water to make water.
Do you know of any other sort of ratios like that?
Well, for like a Google search, it takes about we consume about a teaspoon of water per Google search.
A teaspoon of water?
Teaspoon of water. And so if you think about that, I think there's over 200 million searches in a given day. It starts to add up.
Wow, Todd made me realize that maybe I've been unfairly singling out the beer industry, and there's water that goes into just about everything we use. To get a better sense of this, I decided to track all the water that goes into everything I use in a typical day. After I added it all up, I use about 2,000 gallons in a typical day. Putting it all in context, I'm not feeling quite as bad about the beer I drink. And I thought back to my conversation with Todd. Maybe the thing is not to get so overwhelmed by this impact we might be having, but just to be aware of it, and then we can make better decisions and inform policymakers to help us shape a better future.
I think it kind of comes down to what allows you to sleep at night peacefully. If you're worried about your water consumption, well, then you can change that.
Yeah.
If you're worried about your energy consumption, well, you can change that, and so that it allows you to have some joy and peace in your life.
Well, I know that having a couple beers helps me sleep at night too. So. I was sleeping easier knowing that it wasn't just beer that was having an impact. Because it's beer that's helping me get through graduate school, so I'll be better prepared to go out and tackle some of the world's environmental problems.